This is not just a murder case. It's one of the most heartbreaking and haunting stories you will ever hear. Dru Sjodin, a beautiful college student full of dreams, vanished right after finishing her shift at a shopping mall. The killer was a repeat sex offender, released back into society just months before he struck. The months-long search uncovered chilling evidence, a brutal truth, and a shocking loophole in the legal system. If you only watch one true crime case in your life, make it this one, because it's as devastating as it is infuriating, and it will stay with you forever. The Last Call. Dru Sjodin's life was defined by energy, kindness, and ambition. Born September 26, 1981, in the small Minnesota town of Pequot Lakes, she was the kind of person who made an impression everywhere she went. She loved the arts, drawing, crafting, and thrived in sports like basketball, volleyball, and golf. She poured herself into charity work, eager to help anyone who needed it, and her warmth drew people in. In high school, her peers voted her prom queen. After graduation, Dru left home for the University of North Dakota, majoring in fine arts. It was a 3-hour drive from her parents' house, but she made the trip often, staying close to her roots. Between her studies, 2 part-time jobs, and campus activities, she still found time for charity work. She had even joined a special university travel program, eagerly counting down to an upcoming trip to Australia. She was also in love. Her relationship with Chris had grown serious, and the two were making plans for the future. On November 22, 2003, 22-year-old Dru headed to her weekend shift at a clothing store. Later that night, she was scheduled to waitress at a local club. After wrapping up her first job, she stopped by another shop in the mall, bought a purse, and walked toward the parking lot. On the way, she called Chris. They talked for about 4 minutes, until something strange happened. Dru suddenly went quiet mid-sentence. After a pause, she said, "Oh my God, okay." Then the line went dead. Chris assumed it was a dropped call or a dead battery, but 3 hours later, his phone rang again. It was Dru's number. When he picked up, there was only silence. A faint rush of wind, the muted beeps of phone buttons being pressed. Chris called her name over and over, no answer. Now uneasy, Chris called her back, but she didn't pick up. He rang her roommate, hoping for reassurance. She hadn't heard from Dru all day, but brushed it off. Dru was probably busy with work. That reassurance shattered minutes later. Dru's roommate got a call from the club manager. Dru had never shown up for her shift, nor had she called in. For Dru Sjodin, always punctual, always reliable, this was unthinkable. Something was wrong. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us and helps us grow. A huge thank you to everyone who's been watching. The clues in the parking lot. Dru's roommate couldn't shake the unease after hearing about the strange call Chris had described. Her concern grew into outright fear, and she began calling every hospital in the area. No one matching Dru's description had been admitted. It was late by then, and she decided it was time to involve the police. She explained the troubling chain of events: missed shifts, unsettling calls, no sign of Dru. But city police saw no cause for urgency. Dru was 22, an adult, and they suggested waiting a little longer before taking action. Refusing to sit back, the roommate turned to the University of North Dakota's campus police. Their response was immediate. Their first stop was the mall where Dru had worked her shift that day, the last place anyone had seen her. In the parking lot, her car was still there, hours after her shift had ended. The doors were unlocked. Inside, nothing suggested a struggle. But then, just a few feet away, officers noticed something that made their stomachs drop. A small knife sheath lying on the pavement. The find was suspicious enough for campus police to call in the city department. This time, detectives came. They requested CCTV from the lot, but Dru's car had been parked in a blind spot, completely outside the camera's reach. Determined, investigators pulled footage from inside the mall instead. They began the painstaking task of reviewing hours of video from dozens of cameras, tracking Dru's final moments before she vanished. It was a slow process in a building that size. Meanwhile, word of her disappearance swept across campus. The university quickly organized a large-scale search effort. Hundreds of students joined in, scouring streets, wooded paths, riverbanks, and isolated spots where someone might hide or be hidden. Faculty urged anyone with even the smallest detail to come forward. The search for Dru Sjodin had begun, and the clock was already ticking. The black shoe by the river. When investigators pulled Dru's phone records, they confirmed Chris's account of their last call. But the location data told a different, more disturbing story. The final call to Chris hadn't come from the mall parking lot. It had pinged a cell tower in a small town 30 minutes away. The wind and faint button clicks Chris had heard suddenly made sense. Dru was already far from where she was supposed to be. Her car was still at the mall. She couldn't have driven herself. The conclusion was chilling. Dru had likely been abducted. Days passed with no breakthrough. Detectives combed through mall surveillance while search teams scoured the city. The leads were thin, until 2 days later. In Crookston, Minnesota, not far from where Dru's phone last pinged, officers found a single black shoe near the riverbank. When they showed it to her roommate, recognition was instant. It was Dru's. The discovery deepened the sense of dread. If she'd been taken, she was now miles from safety. Police spread the alert, pulling in nearby departments to widen the search. Back at the mall, investigators finally found security footage from the day Dru disappeared. There she was, moving between shops, arms full of holiday gifts, smiling. On her feet were the same black shoes now sitting in the evidence room. With this clear image of her last known outfit, detectives rewound the tapes and began scanning for patterns. Faces that appeared again and again near Dru. It didn't take long before one figure began to stand out. The man in black. As investigators combed through the mall's security footage, one figure began to emerge. A middle-aged man, dressed head to toe in black, walking with a cane. His behavior set him apart immediately. The cameras showed him entering the grocery store attached to the mall multiple times. Each time, he left without buying a thing. He didn't browse the aisles. He didn't look at products. Instead, his attention seemed fixed on the shoppers, particularly women. On footage from outside the store, the same man appeared again, sitting on a bench, watching people pass by. Then something happened that made detectives lean closer to the monitor. A young woman with a passing resemblance to Dru walked past. The man stood, left his bench, and began to follow her. Over the next few hours of recordings, the same pattern repeated. This man trailing young women around the mall. The footage was suspicious, but it wasn't enough to identify him. Investigators turned to criminal records, compiling a list of 60 local men with serious prior offenses. They eliminated anyone whose appearance didn't match the figure in the video. That left just 4 names. One stood out, 50-year-old Alfonso Rodriguez. The resemblance to the man in black was unmistakable. Rodriguez had a long, violent history. His early years were marked by chronic health problems that made school and social life difficult, especially around women. One of his legs was shorter than the other, forcing him to walk with a cane. At 21, he attempted to assault a woman who had given him a ride home, pulling a knife on her in her own car. She fought him off, but not long after, he attacked 2 more women in the same month. The court ordered 5 years of mandatory therapy. Upon release, he was arrested again for assault, though prosecutors couldn't make the charges stick. Soon after, he attempted to abduct another woman, stabbing her during the attack. This time he was caught and convicted, earning a 23-year prison sentence. Rodriguez walked out of prison on May 1st, 2003, just 7 months before Dru disappeared. His release came with supervision from relatives, who privately doubted he was ready to re-enter society. He moved in with his mother in Crookston, the very town where Dru's black shoe had been found by the riverbank. Closing in on the suspect. By day 4 of the investigation, detectives were convinced Alfonso Rodriguez was connected to Dru Sjodin's disappearance. They brought him in. Rodriguez admitted he'd been at the mall that day, but denied any involvement. He claimed he'd gone to see a movie, and even named the title. But when police checked, the story collapsed. The film wasn't playing at that theater. It wasn't playing anywhere in town. The lie opened the door for a deeper search. When officers asked to look inside his car, Alfonso surprised them by agreeing. What they found turned suspicion into certainty. A store receipt revealed he'd purchased a pocket knife. The sheath found near Dru's car was a perfect match. Then came something worse. The knife itself, submerged in a bottle of cleaning solution. Forensic testing on the vehicle revealed traces of wiped blood. Technicians pulled a DNA sample and compared it to Dru's toothbrush. It was an exact match. The search turned up even more. A woman's shoe and a second knife, untouched by cleaning agents. This blade carried dried blood. Again, a DNA match to Dru. On December 10th, armed with mounting evidence, police arrested Alfonso Rodriguez for kidnapping and suspected murder. But there was still no sign of Dru, and Rodriguez refused to talk. The hunt for her shifted into overdrive. Authorities appealed to the public, pulling in more volunteers, combing Crookston and surrounding areas. Heavy winter snow choked off access to remote search zones, slowing the work. By early March, 3 months after Dru vanished, there was still no trace of her. Alfonso pleaded not guilty as trial preparations began. Few believed Dru was still alive. But with the forensic evidence stacked against him, prosecutors were confident. They could win a conviction, even without a body. The thaw. As winter loosened its grip, the snow finally began to retreat. For investigators, the change meant something critical. They could now reach the places that had been sealed off for months. Crews pushed into forests, swept through open fields, and searched along rivers and lakes. Then, on April 17th, the call everyone had been dreading came in. A few miles west of Crookston, searchers had found a body submerged in the Red River. It was Dru Sjodin. The area had been frozen solid through the winter, hidden under a thick blanket of snow and ice. Only when the thaw came did her body surface from its hiding place. The medical examiner's findings were grim. Dru had bruises, knife wounds, and clear evidence of sexual assault. The cause of death could not be pinpointed. The stab wounds and marks of strangulation were obvious, but there was also a chilling possibility. She might have been left alive in that remote spot, only to die from exposure. Investigators estimated she had been dead within 3 hours of her abduction. Now, with her body recovered, prosecutors had the final piece they needed to bring her killer to justice. A death penalty case. Because the abduction happened in North Dakota, but the murder took place in Minnesota, the case fell under federal jurisdiction, and that opened the door to the death penalty, despite it being banned in both states. Minnesota's governor publicly backed the possibility, though it stirred heated debate. In North Dakota, it was the first time in over a century that a resident faced execution. The trial began in the summer of 2006. Rodriguez clung to his claims of innocence, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. On February 8, 2007, the jury sentenced him to death. The execution wouldn't come quickly. As with most capital cases, appeals and delays stretched on for years. Rodriguez remained behind bars, awaiting his fate. A law in Dru's name, for Dru's family, justice meant more than a conviction. It meant change. They threw their weight behind legislation to create a national registry of violent offenders. By the summer of 2007, the Dru Sjodin National Sex Offender Public website became law, giving the public online access to the addresses and details of offenders convicted of violent crimes. Her parents were adamant. Rodriguez should never have been freed. Later, the very doctor in charge of his mandatory treatment program confirmed their fears. He had strongly opposed Rodriguez's release, recommending he be transferred to prison because he remained dangerous. Despite the warnings, Rodriguez was set loose, and within months, Dru Sjodin was gone. Justice challenged. For Dru Sjodin's family, the 2007 death sentence for Alfonso Rodriguez had been the closest thing to justice they could hope for. But years later, that sense of finality was shattered. In 2011, Rodriguez's lawyers filed an appeal, arguing he suffered from developmental issues. That first attempt failed. But in 2021, a second appeal succeeded, and the case was cracked open again. This time, the judge sided with the defense. He acknowledged evidence suggesting Rodriguez did have developmental challenges, and noted that his original defense team hadn't been given a fair chance to present those details during trial. He pointed to Rodriguez's troubled childhood, chronic health problems, and testimony from experts who now claimed the medical examiner had exaggerated the severity of Dru's injuries, painting a picture, they argued, that wasn't as horrific as jurors had been led to believe. For Dru's loved ones, the legal maneuvering felt like a fresh wound. The result was devastating. Rodriguez's death sentence was overturned, and a new trial was ordered. In March 2023, Alfonso Rodriguez was resentenced, this time to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He would never face execution. What made the outcome even harder to swallow was a disturbing fact. In 2013, during an interview from death row, Rodriguez had openly confessed to killing Dru. Yet now, he would live out the rest of his days behind bars, spared from the sentence the jury had chosen. Honoring Dru. In the face of it all, Dru's family refused to let her name fade. The University of North Dakota established a scholarship in her honor, still active today. In her hometown, they built a memorial garden, a quiet place for reflection and remembrance. Plans are underway for a similar memorial on the university campus, ensuring that Dru's life and legacy will be remembered by future generations. For her family, these tributes are more than memorials. They are acts of defiance against the man who took her life, and a way to keep Dru's spirit alive. Be sure to let us know what you think of the story in the comments below. And if you like this video, smash the like button and don't forget to subscribe. A playlist is going to pop up right now with more videos you'll love. See you guys next time.